Broadcasting live. It's America's longest running talk show on computers. It's Computer America, bringing you the biggest names in technology with guest interviews, new products, and your emails. Listen live at computeramerica.com on any device around the world. Email the show at live@computeramerica.com or find us on social media. Be sure to check out our website for contests, giveaways, show notes, live video stream, podcasts, and more. You're listening to Computer America.
Hello and welcome into the Computer America Show. We are the nation's longest running, nationally syndicated radio talk show on computers and technology. Thank you for joining us. I'm your host, Ben Crossman, and I hope all of you are having a great day because we have a great show planned for you. And I believe today's guest was actually a reschedule. Very happy that they could work with us and happy to have them on. So in just a minute, we're going to bring on our guest. They are called CyberEdge Group, and hey, it's going to be all about cybersecurity. And again, it's a topic that changes daily and is always a lot of fun to talk about. So stay tuned for that. Also, in the second part of the program, we will be doing computer and technology news, where we talk about a bunch of different things that that we feel that you need to stay caught up on. So it's going to be fun. It's going to be great. And again, thank you for tuning in to Computer America. So before we get started, a couple of things, including computeramerica.com. That's where you'll find everything and anything for today's show. Be that where to listen to us live. And by the way, we think one of the best places is, of course, IRN. But you can find us, our live video feed is there. You can also be sure to enter the social media contest, which is brought to you by Logitech. So check that out. Check out our reviews. Check out our articles that we write there. Everything. ComputerAmerica.com, as well as a link to our guest website if you'd like to check them out after the program. So with all that being said, why don't we go ahead and just jump right into this? So as I said, CyberEdge Group, and here to tell us who they are, what they do, and I'm sure we have probably the best person to do that because he is their co-founder and CEO. So joining us via the phone is Mr. Steve Piper. And Steve, thank you for joining us here on Computer America.
Thanks, Ben. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Our pleasure, our pleasure. And as I said, this is going to be fun because I think at this point, it's kind of like talking to patients about the cold. Not that, it's, I hope it's going to be a little bit more interesting. But my point is that at some point, everyone's been affected by this. These hacks seem to be getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And especially if you live in the United States or really anywhere around the world, your information has probably been compromised in some way. So, hey, talking to you guys, it's going to be fun. So before we get started, let's talk about CyberEdge Group, what they do, and, just why was the company founded?
Sure. Well, thanks so much, again, for having me on. So CyberEdge Group is a research and marketing firm. We're headquartered in Annapolis, Maryland, but our customers and our consultants are spread out around the country. What we do is we serve high-tech vendors, software companies, hardware companies, services. Roughly about 80% of our clients are cybersecurity vendors, and that's our primary focus. But we do serve vendors and IT service management and storage and virtualization and things of that nature as well. I personally am a CISSP. So certified information systems security professional. So cybersecurity is a passion of mine. But actually, I was on your show, I don't know, it was 12, 15 years ago when I was in a different segment of IT and IT service management. So I've been a fan of Computer America for more than a decade. And so that's a little bit about CyberEdge. We are a research firm, and we do this annual research study. We've been doing it 5 years now, called the Cyber Threat Defense Report. And if it's all right with you, I can tell you about that unless you have any other questions, Ben.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you for mentioning that, and I'll be sure to let Craig know that that you guys have talked before because of course he was the host 10 or so years ago, and it's awesome to have people who come on the show and then find out that they're still doing great things. So yeah, please let's go ahead and get into it. And obviously, annual report, we get to talk about kind of last year in summary and some of your findings. I was kind of reading thumbing through it, and they're pretty interesting. So tell us about, again, the annual Cyber Threat Defense Report and, kind of how you go about making it before we get into what you found.
Okay, great. That sounds perfect. So there's lots of reports out there from different vendors, software, hardware, services vendors, and several of the reports out there tell you how data breaches occur. And that's cool. We want to understand trends about data breaches and cyber threats, and that's fantastic. What we do is something a little bit different. Instead of telling you how cyber threats occur and how data breaches occur, we survey enterprises and we tell you what enterprises are doing, what investments they're making to mitigate the risks of cyber threats. So specifically, and I mentioned this is our 5th year doing this Cyber Threat Defense Report. Mm-hmm. This is a web-based survey. It was conducted last November, 27 questions, and we had 1,200 security professionals from 17 countries, 19 industries, lots of different company sizes, minimum of 500 employees. So we're not talking about, tiny companies, but a healthy mix of, anywhere from 500 to 1,000 employees to more than 25,000 employees and everything in between. And we asked them, what sorts of investments are you making in network security, endpoint security, cloud security, mobile security? What are the greatest inhibitors? Have you been attacked? Was your company victimized by a successful cyber attack? And what are your thoughts about next year? Do you think you're more or less likely to be a victim again next year? So it's a really insightful report. It's a way for security professionals working for enterprises to benchmark themselves. How would they answer the questions of these surveys? Has their company been attacked? What investments are they making in? What are the things that they care about? And then they can compare the results, on a global basis, on a regional basis, and also on an industry basis. So hopefully that gives you and our listeners here a little bit of more background about the Cyber Threat Defense Report.
Yeah, it certainly does. And I guess you mentioned 5 years. I'm kind of curious if, when you first started doing this, I guess the recent uptick in maybe not even large breaches, because those were probably happening before, but at least the readiness for the media to at least cover them and let people know. I think it, really kind of took off with Equifax. Even before that, you had situations such as Target or Home Depot. You have these situations where it's not just covered on, random tech news programs such as ourselves, but it's also, the 5 o'clock news and on more mainstream parts. I guess my question would be, has it, like, if nothing else, and we're going to talk about, the findings, but if nothing else, the awareness and the importance of the questions that you're asking, do you think that's seen an uptick? Like, is your survey more relevant to these companies than it was when you first started?
I think it's equally as relevant, but it's more interesting. And you really hit the nail on the head. 5 years, 10 years ago, you're watching the evening news on the major networks, and maybe once in a blue moon you might hear about a data breach. And then suddenly we're seeing these high-profile breaches. You mentioned Target and Home Depot, Heartland Payment Systems, and then certainly during the election cycle, we're hearing about threats from Russia, and of course before then China, nation-state threat actors. We're hearing about hacktivists, like
Right.
Anonymous. It is just now cybersecurity is part of the everyday conversation. Water cooler conversations in all sorts of companies. And so it's more in your face. It's more front and center. And, definitely as you mentioned up front when you introduced me, more of an interesting topic to talk about. And, certainly makes reports like ours are a lot more interesting for
Right.
sure.
Right. So let's get into some of these data points. Let's see. We have an excerpt here. In the report, they said that 77% were affected by a successful cyber attack last year. Randomly, I might ask you to, kind of define what you would call a cyber attack. But so you say here that the silver lining is that for the first time in 5 years, that percentage has dropped. which is, kind of surprising because you'd think as more things were connected, then, you get more of these. But do you think the tide has finally turned in this war against cybercrime? Which, someone could reasonably draw that conclusion. If the trend has finally reversed, then that means we must be getting a better handle on the situation. So talk about what constitutes a cyber attack and what the 77% really means.
Yep. No, excellent point. So this is actually the good news. Hearing that 77% of our responding organizations were successfully attacked, that being the good news. The reason that's the good news, and I am going to answer your question about what we mean by a successful attack, but just to put this in a context, the first year we did this report, it was 62% of responding organizations were successfully attacked. Okay, then the next year up to 71, from 62 to 71, and 71 to 76, then 76 to 79. So that's 4 reports or 3 in between 3 changes where there were rises. So you know what? I mean, a 2% drop from 79.2 to 77.2, it's not a lot, but I'm telling you, going down in terms of the percentage of successful attacks is a hell of a lot better than going up.
Right.
So as a security professional, I'm going to take good news where I can get it. To answer your question, what is a successful attack? It's the attacker got in, okay? They bypassed, of course, everyone wants defense in depth. You want, your perimeter security and then network security, endpoint security, host-based security, application security, all surrounded by, policies and what I call the human firewall. But attacks do get through, and sometimes if you have the right technology, such as security analytics platforms that are much better at telling you from a forensic standpoint what happened and what was stolen, then it's easy to know if any data was actually breached. But these are attacks where they got through and they're there. It may take a couple hundred days to figure it out. Mandiant and other organizations, talk about the dormant time when attackers are connected to the network and how long have they been connected. It may be hundreds of days before you find out, but they're successfully in and potentially leading to a confirmed data breach.
So, and this is something that we're seeing legislation start to work its way through Washington, and we're starting to see. Just yesterday we were talking about Yahoo being fined by the FTC or the FEC, whatever. Essentially, where in the case with Yahoo, we're 4 years removed. I think it happened in 2014 when we first heard about it, and we're just now getting the last of the fines finally settled. And we see situations such as Uber, where it took a full year before people were made aware that they were compromised because they tried to pay off the people. Don't recommend that.
Yep.
But and you just mentioned something there where it takes a couple hundred days to, really understand the full depth of what these, intruders were able to not only look at, but how long were they looking at? What did they actually, what were they actually able to pull? I think the legislation is looking at something like 5 days to disclose when a customer's, important information has been stolen by a cyber attacker. Hundreds of days versus the 5 that they're hoping for versus kind of what we've seen in the wild, which could be anywhere from, months to, in some cases, unfortunately, years. And again, I'm just asking, Steve Piper, as your personal opinion, how do those numbers kind of reconcile with one another? Because it's not easy to really understand what went wrong, but also tell your customers, you were compromised, yes or no, because that seems pretty, hard to really quantify.
Yeah, it's a tough high wire act. I mean, on one hand, you want to be responsible and disclose as quickly as possible, but on the other hand, if you're a publicly held company, when you set off the alarms that, hey, we had a data breach, and you don't know the scope of the breach, if you're a credit card processor and you don't know if 1,000 credit card numbers were stolen or 100 million, that's a pretty big difference.
Right.
Okay, so So on one hand, we want to inform the public that you may have been compromised, so that the public is empowered. They can make their own choice whether they want to try to find out for sure, or maybe take a closer look at their credit card statement. But on the other hand, you have a responsibility to stockholders and other constituents, where you don't want to overreact and say the sky is falling when really barely anything happened. There's technology that's been around for years called security analytics, or security analytics platform, where this can help reduce the time it takes to figure out what happens by kind of like everyone has a DVR in their house, right? Or many people do. Certainly not everybody, but certainly a lot of people do. And you record your favorite shows. But this is technology that kind of records everything that's going on your network, so that you can go back in time and figure out what happened. So there's technology like that. Not everybody has it. So you kind of want to strike that balance, between responsible disclosure to your customers, but also not adversely affecting stockholders by setting off too many alarm bells without first knowing exactly what happened. So, if the average dwell time for an attack is, I don't have it in front of me, 220 days, 240 days, something like that, whether it's an extra 3 days or 5 days or 10 days, is it really going to make that big of a difference? So I don't know, 5 days maybe sounds about right.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. No, and so let's go ahead and get back to the report. And by the way, for anyone out there watching the video portion of the show, just found the infographic you made. Great looking infographic, by the way, that shows a lot of what we're going to be talking about here today. And yeah, let's get into kind of the next point, where you say that about half of your respondents were affected by ransomware last year. And I guess and you asked 1,200 qualified IT security decision makers and practitioners, so people whose really jobs either this touches or relies upon. Like, I would say these are probably the most educated part of companies, that say half of their companies have been kind of hit by this. That doesn't say anything about the general population. That doesn't say anything about small, medium businesses, where they're just as, if not more, susceptible to hacking or, clicking a bad link or something like that. Just in general, what kind of advice would you kind of give to them? Because, they generally don't have IT departments. Individuals don't have someone kind of setting up their defenses, digging the moats. What do you kind of recommend?
Yeah, it's an important question. Ransomware, it's arguably the number one cybersecurity topic talked about in the press last year, largely driven by WannaCry. Just to quickly recap the stat from our report, and then I'm going to answer your question.
Sure.
and provide a suggestion here. So specifically, of those 1,200 security professionals that we asked, 500 plus employees, 55% of the responding organizations were victimized by ransomware, 55%. So that's scary, okay? But here's the scary part, and this was a new question we added this year. Last year, to be honest with you, we just sort of assumed that, if you paid the ransom using, anonymous currency like Bitcoin, that your data would, be restored. And for the benefit of your listeners, ransomware, what it does is it typically encrypts the data on your hard disk, whether it's your personal computer at home or your laptop at work, or it could be a server. Where the threat actor is encrypting the data, and you will not get that data back unless you pay the ransom. Last year, we kind of assumed that if you pay the ransom, that you get the data back, but actually that was not a good assumption. So we asked the question this year: if you did pay the ransom, did you get your data back? Was it suddenly unencrypted so that you could recover your data? 50% said yes.
See,
50% said no.
That's something that's, for a while there, we actually had reports to the opposite. Well, 50-50 is still 50-50, but we actually had reports that they were unlocking them at surprisingly, pretty good rates, because they assumed that, if you did go about paying it and you essentially played ball with the hacker, then, they want you to keep paying. They don't want you to think, oh, even if I did pay, I wouldn't get it back anyways, so why bother paying? So that number seems to have gone down. That's interesting. I'll add that to the bank because, interesting.
And then to answer your question about advice, and this is so simple, For your listeners, and this is personal advice as well as business advice. Backups, backups. So I've got 2 daughters. We got so many family memories, and I'm maybe a little bit extreme when it comes to backups because I have a local backup, a USB drive, but I also back up to the cloud. So I don't want to assume, if a fire happens or a robber comes in, they steal my computer, they steal my backup. Well, at least I have it in the cloud. Or if the cloud vendor goes out of business when I really need a backup, well, then I've got it local. So I do both. Where this comes into play in ransomware is simple. Ransomware encrypts all your data, and what you can do is say, sorry, Mr. Hacker, I'm moving on. Wipe your, it's a pain in the butt, okay, but wipe your hard disk clean, reinstall your OS, reinstall your apps. It's the data that you can't replace. You can replace your OS, you can replace your apps, but you can't replace your data. And so if you got the backup, then, you're golden. From an enterprise perspective, and we had a dozen sponsors. Our study, to be clear, is a vendor agnostic research study. No vendor names of any kind are referenced in the survey instrument. But to fund the study, we have about a dozen sponsors, silver, gold, and platinum sponsors. And one of our platinum sponsors, Code 42, that's what they do. They do managed backups of laptops for organizations. So there's definitely solutions out there that do that.
Yeah, and by the way, just kind of glancing at the infographic here again, susceptible nations, as in you didn't just segment this into kind of company size or things like that, but you also showed that these companies that are all over the world, I guess I'm kind of interested because you'd think that the best practices would be followed across all countries, especially among your questionnaire base. Best practices are best practices. It doesn't matter if they're in Spanish or if they're in English or if they're in Italian. It just kind of is what it is. But you have some here that, the nations that are most susceptible to these successful attacks. And, kind of surprising because China, as much as we hear about Russia, let's say about a year ago, we heard equally as much about China and the fact that a lot of hackers or a lot of hacks were coming out of that country as well. Topping the list is Mexico, though. Let's talk about what kind of information you can kind of glean off of, what countries are more susceptible than others.
So, what's interesting is these security products, at least 9 out of 10 are made here in the USA, programmed in the USA, or certainly the companies are headquartered in the USA, and they're often in English. And, enterprises in, Europe, Asia Pac, Latin America, whatever, some use localized versions, some use English versions. The reason I bring this up is I've worked for software companies for 20 years, and usually there's a lag. So when you innovate, the English version is hit first. Then if you have double byte enabled languages, Chinese, Japanese, those are sometimes lagging. So that could, potentially explain why some of these non-English countries, Mexico, China, Spain, Turkey, Colombia, France, are more at the top of the list. That could be one of the areas. But also, here in the U.S., we certainly have an IT shortage. An IT security talent shortage, and that's one of the themes of the report. But that can be echoed. That can even be more of a shortage outside the U.S., where they don't have leading training organizations, like SANS, for example, that provides a lot of cybersecurity training, or ISC Squared, where I got my CISSP certification from. So that can also be a challenge to find that IT security talent in outside the U.S. and Canada, for sure.
Right, yeah, and let's talk about that because you say here lack of skilled personnel. What does it really take to get someone skilled in IT? Because I've heard a couple different routes. I'm not really familiar on if someone needs to go get a 4-year degree and then go get certified in a bunch of different ways, or if you could kind of pop someone off the street and just get them certified and they're off to the races. When you say lack of skilled personnel, are we talking about people who've been using the software for 8 years, even though it's only been around for 5 years? What like, what do we need to do to get people or more of these skilled personnel out there? Is this a training? Is this a message? What's the holdup?
That's a fair question. First, let me provide some frame of reference for the scope of the problem. Okay, and I don't have so Gartner is a very well-known market research firm. Gartner and Forrester, do a lot of research, and roughly in 2018, and this is going to be almost exact, but pretty close. Gartner predicted that the overall IT market was going to grow by 4-point-something%. But it's basically double the rate for cybersecurity. In other words, cybersecurity is by far the fastest growing segment of IT. And I've spoken personally to chief information security officers and directors and VPs in security, and it's so funny. They say, they kind of have the same thing. If we say no to a security investment and then we're breached, then we're in trouble, and I'm going to get fired. So the investments in security are rising, but the budgets are rising, but they're rising faster than you can hire people. Okay, so an interesting question. This is probably my favorite question out of the 27 questions of the survey. We ask, on a scale of 1 to 5, with 5 being highest, rate how each of the following inhibit your organization from adequately defending itself against cyber threats. So to put it another way, what's standing in the way? What is standing in your way of preventing successful cyber attacks? And for the past few years, we've had the same response 3 years in a row as first place: low security awareness among employees, meaning we just don't train our people enough how to not click on attachments from spear phishing emails or go to websites that maybe they shouldn't, that could potentially have cyber threats in them. But the number one answer this year, for the first time, is lack of skilled personnel. And what's also interesting is 5 years ago, it was in 5th place, then 4 years ago in 4th, 3 years ago in 3rd, 2 years ago in 2nd, and this year it finally made it to 1st place, lack of skilled personnel. That is the greatest inhibitor to IT security success for defending against successful cyber attacks. And it's a growing problem. So if any of your listeners are in college or high school, perhaps,
right,
consider a degree in cybersecurity. I got a business degree, but my first job out of college was a systems engineer, and then I evolved my career into cybersecurity. It's a great place to be.
Yeah, it definitely seems like it. It not just job security, but there's plenty of room for people. I'm sure even with kind of medium level experience could certainly do great things. Just talking about these threats. What seems to be the number one thing? Because we've heard a bunch of different terms, things like advanced. I think it's like advanced persistent threats, where someone kind of gets in and is able to siphon data out continuously. We've all heard of kind of like malwares, Trojan viruses, ransomware. You mentioned. I mean, what are companies really facing when it comes to actually having to defend themselves?
Yep. So that's a question. It's a staple of our survey that we ask each year, and the top. We added a response last year, and being ransomware, and right out of the gate, ransomware is in 2nd place. But the other two have been in the top 3 each time: malware and spear phishing. Okay, so the top 3: malware is number 1, ransomware number 2, and then phishing. Spear phishing emails, in terms of those cyber threats that are of the greatest concern to enterprise security professionals. Down at the bottom of the list, and we're talking, I think there's 11 different classes of cyber threats. Mm-hmm. And for the benefit of the readers, you have the infographic available. We have the full report and the infographic on our website, cyber-edge.com/CDR for this cyber threat defense report. But of 11 different classes of cyber threats, of lesser concern are drive-by downloads, That popped up a few years ago, but that's starting to calm down more. Insider threats certainly, was talked about a lot, but that's a bit of a less of a concern. And then you mentioned it, APTs. Advanced persistent threats.
And actually, Steve, I'm
please.
actually going to have to stop you right there because the music means we're going to take a break. Would you mind staying over so we can finish the conversation?
It's my pleasure.
All right, perfect. So everyone, talking to Steve Piper, co-founder and CEO, CyberEdge Group. Everyone, stay tuned. More Computer America after this.
Greece is cheap.
But the airfare costs a fortune.
Paris?
Not much closer, and again, airfare...
What about Puerto Vallarta?
Let's face it, flying anywhere is just too expensive.
Wait, what's this? Low-cost airlines.
With one call to low-cost airlines, you'll drastically slash your travel costs. We're talking insanely low airline prices to any of your favorite destinations. Where would you like to go? London, Rome, Costa Rica, Australia?
Wow, that's cheap.
So why wait? Call now to learn how crazy cheap it is to fly anywhere in the U.S. or international. Our prices are so low, we can't publish them. The only way to get them is to call to instantly hear the most amazing best deals on airline travel. It's that easy. So call now and start packing.
800-215-4461. 800-215-4461. 800-215-4461. That's 800-215-4461.
We are all Brother Wolf. 10 years ago, a group of locals banded together to create positive change. We took animals into our homes, held adoption events at local retailers, and talked to the community about our mission to help build a no-kill Asheville. A decade later, we have achieved so many victories for animals in need. There's been so much progress, yet there's still so much to do. As part of our year-long celebration, we encourage you to become a member of our special Compassionate Circle program. With a monthly donation of $10 or more, you will have behind-the-scenes access to the work we are doing at Brother Wolf. Our goal is to reach 1,000 members because we receive no government funding. Working together, we can help build and sustain no-kill communities. Learn more at compassionatecircle.bwar.org. We are a 501c3 tax-deductible organization.
Hello and welcome back into the Computer America Show. We are continuing on with our guest. He is from the CyberEdge Group, and again, you can find out more about them at our website, computeramerica.com, or just check them out, cyber-edge.com. And like I said, we have a link to them in the show notes right there. But yeah, also, if you missed any part of today's conversation and you want to go back and check it out, feel free to head on over to wherever podcasts are heard, be it iTunes, Google Play Store, iHeartRadio, so on and so forth, SoundCloud. And yeah, you can find the entire show right there for download. So Steve has so graciously agreed to continue on with us, so we can kind of wrap up our conversation. We have a few more questions, but Steve, before the break, you were mentioning the different kinds of security threats that they were dealing with, and I think you were just getting through advanced persistent threats. But please, if you want to finish up that thought.
Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah, I appreciate it. And I'm having fun. I'll stay as long as you need me to.
Great.
Yeah. So, I mentioned before the break, top of the list of concern among enterprises for cyber threats, malware, ransomware, phishing. Bottom of the list, drive-by downloads, insider threats, and advanced persistent threats. And you mentioned APTs, a few minutes before the break. So it is a concern, but hopefully, the companies that are affected by major data breaches, we certainly hear about them, but they're not. The average organization is not affected by a major headline-creating data breach. So that's good news there. But certainly malware, and spear phishing, those are the top ways that organizations become compromised, and then that potentially lead to APTs and advanced targeted attacks, of course. Yep.
Gotcha. So let's go ahead and move on to the next one, where you have here that before you said that, the market as it goes, IT is just going through the roof, but then cybersecurity is, of course, going through the roof at an even greater rate. So with all this, what can you tell us about IT security spending for the next year? Because you mentioned that you were a marketing firm, and you go out, you collect this information, and then you have to do your marketing side of the business. What is the main job here for a marketing firm in, kind of cybersecurity? Is it about training programs that they can invest in? Is it about new products that, are there, instead of McAfee 2017, do people need to upgrade to McAfee 2018? Just what do, kind of you as the CyberEdge Group need to get businesses, kind of get their eyes and their ears on? Because I don't think there's any kind of one product. And by the way, we're not sponsored by McAfee or anything. It's just, what do you need to get people's eyes and ears on to really, take advantage of not only the increased spending, but the increased need of this area?
Yeah. Well, I think the goal of any IT security organization is to achieve defense in depth. The idea of the perimeter being, the primary place where you're placing your security defenses, that is long gone. It's so much more common for for employees to have laptops than desktops. So they take these laptops with them, they take them on the road, they hand carry them on their arm, walking right through the front door. And when employees do that, they are bypassing their $100,000 firewall with a cheap pair of sneakers. So you got to have defense in depth. You got to have the network security, the perimeter security, network security, host-based security. It takes, dozens of different security technologies, hopefully working in concert together, where they're sharing intelligence and you have a platform to correlate intelligence and threats and, to give IT security the upper hand. But what's interesting, you alluded to this, at the start of the question in terms of trends, and I've already mentioned, that IT security is red hot. One question that we wanted to ask is, what is security's slice of the IT budget pie? So in other words, what percent of the overall IT budget is consumed by security? And when I mean security, I'm talking about people and technologies, all in, anything that's related at all to IT security. Now, anecdotally, I remember this about a decade ago, Gartner, research analyst firm, they did a press release a decade-ish ago, and it was like 5%. Okay, so $1 out of $20 of the IT budget was dedicated to security. Right. So this year's report, 12%. Okay, 12% of a typical IT budget is dedicated to security. That's more than double it was 10 years ago. And even higher in the U.S. at 13%.
Yeah, I guess that number is a little surprising because 5%, that's what I would have guessed, if we were doing some kind of quiz night here. But 12%, that means that, and I'm assuming that this competes with things like hiring personnel, like not just security personnel, but all personnel, networking, that includes equipment cost and, server space, things like 12% is actually pretty darn high. So yeah, that's some serious investment that's going on.
It is, and then the more dollars that are being invested. Don't get me wrong. This trend helps put food on my table because the majority of our customers are security vendors. But this is just not sustainable. We can't do this because every dollar that's spent on security, is less dollars that can be spent on the core business, on innovating, on e-commerce systems, to process orders, on everything else that's more revenue generating. We're spending so much on security, it's just not sustainable. So it's going to be interesting to see next year if the trend continues upward, or in a way, I hope it trends downward, for the betterment of humanity and for business and so on. But it's going to be interesting to see how it changes next year, and I certainly hope you'll have me on next year.
Yeah, absolutely. This report it's weird because we talk about a lot of these fields, but we talk about them individually, kind of as they pop up, kind of throughout our news feed. And you've done a very good job of putting it all in one kind of place. I mean, later on in the news segment, we're going to talk about, the idea of police take down the world's largest DDoS site for hire. I mean, it's cybersecurity. I think it touches a lot of different segments, and you could talk about law enforcement. You could talk about, just Facebook and phishing attempts, but to put it all in one place, really, really interesting. Let's go ahead and, kind of wrap this up. And let's say, if we missed any part of your, kind of research, anything that we didn't talk about today that you really want to kind of highlight as interesting or important?
We hit all the key points. I mean, I'll say something. This is one of the lesser known statistics from the report, but just something I find fascinating. So Verizon, obviously Verizon is a cell phone company and internet company, but not everyone is aware that Verizon is also a managed security service provider. It's one of the most successful in the year. And there's they have this report, and honestly, if I had to pick one report to read each year, it wouldn't be mine. It would be the Verizon report. It's really, really cool. It's called the DBIR, the Data Breach Investigations Report. And a couple of years ago, Verizon had one of the most earth-shattering statistics that I have ever seen in a report. And what it said was 99.9% of the data breaches that were pertaining to malware, which is the majority of them, 99.9% of those data breaches pertain to vulnerabilities that were more than a year old. Okay, so let's think about that just for a second. For the Microsoft Windows users, you guys can relate because on the second Tuesday of every month, Microsoft Tuesday, Microsoft issues their security updates. Time to patch, your Windows. And
right.
Next reboot, and they all have to do that. So we're patching vulnerabilities. What we're saying here is these data breaches, 99.9% of them occur in vulnerabilities that haven't been patched for a year. So a brand new question, it's been bothering me for years. So I added a question this year to the survey trying to figure out why. And the question is, what is preventing your organization from patching systems more rapidly? Number one answer, infrequent windows to take production systems offline for patching. Number two, lack of qualified personnel. So now we have that lack of skilled personnel theme. That's another, occurrence. But, organizations are apprehensive to take production systems offline because, well, they're making money. They're selling widgets and whatever. But organizations have to prioritize. They have to make patching a priority. Last plug to Gartner, and I don't get a penny from Gartner. I'm just a fan. Gartner issues strategic planning assumptions, and last year they said the number one activity that enterprises can do to mitigate the risk of cyber threats is patching. And so enterprises must patch. Scan your networks. There's incredible vulnerability management technology out there that can, scan for vulnerabilities in real time, not just quarterly for PCI compliance. But we got to do better. We have to do better. If you wave a magic wand and remove all the vulnerabilities across your network, then the attackers have nothing to expose. And then all this malware, spear phishing, all this stuff is one gigantic moot point.
And I do find that interesting with you because we hear all the time about these 0-day, threats where something is found and then it's sold on the black market of the internet, and people go in, and it's very, it's very Hollywood-esque where it's like, oh, we're in and let's go get it. It's that kind of thing. But I will say that in another life, I worked for a pharmaceutical manufacturing company. I made drugs. It was a lot of fun. But they just purchased a brand new piece of equipment, millions of dollars, put it in. It was a big deal for them because they were able to do this new process. But the problem was that when it came out of the box, I don't think it was new. I think it was, like 10, 15 years old, but in manufacturing, that's almost brand new. And it came with a brand spanking new copy of Windows 95. And that was the only thing that this multi-million-dollar piece of equipment would run on. And if you think that you're going to get a security patch for Windows 95, and yes, it was connected to the internet because they had to monitor it, kind of off-site. And it's like, they're willing to put the money and acquire something that is millions of dollars and is going to, kind of be essential to this new process. But then I guess it's just either too hard or too laborious or, to your point, just no one available to actually make all the changes that need to be made. I really don't have a point here. It's just that I've seen it from that end as well. And I know it happens. I just don't agree that it should happen.
Right. Yeah, completely agree. Yeah. You mentioned 0 days. It's kind of funny. On any given year, there's roughly 10,000, 11,000-ish vulnerabilities that are published. Vulnerabilities are disclosed once, patches are available. But of the 10,000 vulnerabilities in a given year, roughly 24 of them start out as 0 days. And for everyone's benefit, these are vulnerabilities that were discovered by black hatters, evil threat actors, or either evil,
actors, right?
Threat researchers as opposed to the white hatters, the good guys. And so it's, on the grand scheme of things, 0 days are almost an insignificant thing. The odds of being hit by a 0 day are, pretty small. But if you are hit, it's just going to sail right past through what you have, unless you are investing in some pretty modern stuff. And that's the good news. I mean, in terms of what the security industry is producing, we're finally finding really good solutions for detecting threats without signatures, because we just can't keep up as an industry. It was sandboxing a few years ago, and that's still really cool stuff. But now there's machine learning and artificial intelligence, and that's probably the biggest theme right now in terms of network security and endpoint security, cloud security innovations, is this very sophisticated machine learning, artificial intelligence algorithms, and it's actually starting to produce some pretty nice results. NSS Labs just last week at the annual RSA conference in San Francisco, biggest security conference in the world, they issued a report on the endpoint side for advanced endpoint protection solutions. And some of these solutions are really amazing in terms of their ability to mitigate the risk of threats just using machine learning and artificial intelligence. So
right.
There's a lot of hope there. And hopefully that'll help next year's trend. Maybe we'll see, the trend go down in terms of the number of organizations affected by successful data breaches. So we're just going to have to wait and see.
Yeah, it's and I really did like that point, but I guess it's a little bit along the lines of, when that the Chinese space station came down just a couple of weeks ago, like a week or two ago, and they were talking about it can come down anywhere, and they're like, it's like you have a chance to be hit, and then they put up the globe, and it's like as long as you live above or below the 10 degree latitude, and it turns out that's like 99% of living population. But then they're like, you have like your chance of being hit are about equal to winning the lottery, being hit in the head with a coconut, and getting eaten by a shark at the same time. But people were still talking about it. So I think that's why 0 days are talked about as well, is because.
And did you see a day or two ago there was in the news a guy was bitten by a shark who was also hit by lightning. So maybe it's a bad analogy.
yeah. But luckily that was they were like a month apart. But would not want to be in that guy's shoes. But with that being said, I will say that anyone out there who wants to check out the infographic, read the report, and actually I'll go ahead and let you have the last word, Steve. Where can they go to get more information?
Yeah, thanks. So if you happen to work for a security vendor, you want to learn more about CyberEdge, cyber-edge.com, or if you're a security geek like me and you work for an enterprise or you just love cybersecurity and you want to check out the full report and the infographic, you still go to our website, cyber-edge.com/CDR for Cyber Threat Defense Report. So go there and download it, and it's really cool stuff. And Ben, this was a lot of fun. Thanks for having me on. And it's actually I've done 3 radio interviewers, and you're by far the most knowledgeable about cybersecurity. So you certainly know your stuff, and kudos to you. And I had a lot of fun.
And I will say that I'm super lucky to be in this position. Of course, Computer America has been around for a long time, but being able to talk to professionals such as yourself on almost a daily basis, it's hopefully I'm not the only one out there. Our listeners are just as informed. And you're right, if they work in this field, I think that your report and, just talking about this, keeping it in the news, it's going to make a difference. So hopefully Computer America makes your next report a little bit rosier. So with that being said, everyone, one more time, the CyberEdge Group, and of course we are talking to the co-founder and CEO, Mr. Steve Piper. And Steve, I look forward to talking to you next year when you have your next report out as well. So, hey, have a great one. And again, thank you, Steve.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right, have a good one. All right, everyone. So there he goes. And we should, and there we go. So we should go ahead and move on to computer and technology news. We love it when our guests run long, but that of course means less time to get to the stories that we had planned out. But if you want to find out about our guests or any stories that we are going to be doing just about now, of course, in the show notes, because, hey, we know some of you drive or commute or do something where you can't, sit in front of a computer and join us. That's okay. We have you covered. So with that being said, let's go ahead and move on to computer and technology news. And this is brought to you by OWC. So here we go. Oh, wait, wrong one. No, not that one. All right, we got this. Computer technology news brought to you by OWC. There we go. Correct one. All right, so with, let's do our first story, and we only have time for 10 minutes. We don't have time for like one or two or a couple. Let's do some of the bigger ones, and let's go ahead and talk about this one because we mentioned it earlier. Fits nicely into our security themed day, and police have won a victory, but unfortunately, like many things, I'm sure it is just a small victory, and that has to do with the takedown of the world's largest DDoS for hire service. And this is by John Fingus and Gadget. And for those of you who do not know, DDoS, of course, means distributed denial of service. And when it comes to security, we fortunately have ways of mitigating attacks such as these, but from my understanding, it's when one person can direct a bunch of different connections, and I say connections instead of devices because, a connection can be anything from a smart security camera to a web-connected pacemaker to a computer, a laptop, smartphone, to a game console. It could be any of those things. Anything connected to the internet can be used in a DDoS attack, and this has led to large, massive attacks that cripple networks, and in some cases we've seen do things such as, kind of make society grind to a halt. And it's not just about how powerful they've become, but it's also about how easy they are to, kind of hire. And, that's definitely led to a lot of people who would otherwise not be able to do anything pay someone a very small amount, or at least a relatively small amount, and then do a pretty crippling attack. Well, like I said, one for the win column, the police in 12 countries have taken down WebStressor. That was the name of the service, which was the largest service for paid DDoS attacks. And the joint campaign, Operation Power Off, by the way, which was, in 12 countries, this is no small feat. They said that they seized WebStressor's infrastructure in the US, the UK, and the Netherlands. And they said that they also were able to take in the website administrators ranging as far as Australia and Hong Kong. Because, hey, the internet, it is everywhere, so you could have someone living in Hong Kong or in Australia or in Belgium or anywhere that these attacks were being done. And you need this kind of cooperation to do something pretty simplistic. So they said it's not clear just who was arrested, though security guru Brian Krebs found that one of them is likely Jovan Merkovic, a 19-year-old Serbian, a 19-year-old running one of the largest service for hire, services. And let's see, so they said that you could pay as little as $15 to flood a site with traffic, regardless of how little technical knowledge you had. And, well, authorities are touting this as a major victory. There's a good reason to be cautious, though. It doesn't take much to start a new DDoS network, especially if you can wield botnets that will do the hard work in place of specialized servers. So they said that it's definitely a victory, but not a decisive one. And I tend to agree, because they guaranteed did not get everyone who was behind this. And if it was making money, and odds are it was probably making a decent amount of money, it's going to happen again, and it's going to be just as bad. And like I said at the beginning, it's very low technical, so it's not hard to do. So it makes money, not hard to do, and we here at Computer America do not advocate running a DDoS service. But this is not the last we've heard of these types of attacks. So there's that one. Definitely wanted to get that one in. Another one that I wanted to talk about, and some of these we're definitely going to save for tomorrow. All right, this one's pretty interesting. And while not strictly technology, I did find it interesting because, well, Ford makes a lot of vehicles. And, when you hear Ford, some people, of course, run straight to the F-150 truck. But, they have lots of cars, from Ford Focus, Fiesta, Fusion, Taurus, whatever. They have cars. But that's going to end in 2020, because they said that the Ford car lineup is going to go away by the end of 2020. And they said that it's killing the Focus, Fiesta, Fusion, and Taurus, and instead will favor their truck lineup and their SUVs, which, the F-150s, people still love them, are probably making a lot more money. So just yesterday, Ford dropped a bombshell during its Q1 earnings call, where it's going to stop selling all of its cars in the U.S. The Mustang will remain on sale, as well the Focus Active, a model that won't debut until next year, but go away all the others. Instead, the company will focus almost exclusively on SUVs, crossovers, and trucks in the U.S. domestic market. I guess the ones that were, kind of selling. So the Ford president, he said that they said that the reason for the decision: we are committed to taking the appropriate action to drive profitable growth and maximize the returns of our business over the long term. Where we can raise the returns of underperforming parts of our business by making them more fit, we will. And if appropriate returns are not on the horizon, we will shift that capital to where we can play and win. So essentially, all of you who don't like Ford cars, this is your fault, for better or worse. And Ford will be focusing instead on their trucks and SUVs. I just found that interesting, because I know a lot of people with Ford cars. And yeah, looks like just not enough people really, really liked it. All right. Let's see. We have a couple of stories. All right, last one real quick, because, hey, to celebrate the fact that we are on Twitch, and Twitch, we love you. Well, Microsoft shuts down a Halo Online fan mod. That's right, you heard it. Very interesting. Where they say that this could point to a future PC release for the sci-fi shooter. And yeah, there was a mod where this is not the first time we've seen this, where the original developer of the game has sent a cease and desist letter to people running fan-created sites, because there is a need there, because there is a passion. There are people who request this kind of thing. We see this with private servers when it comes to things like World of Warcraft, and where I think even the administrators behind the scenes can appreciate that the audience is asking for A, and we are not delivering it. So they go out and make A themselves. Sometimes it just comes to the point where it gets too popular, too much attention, and they have to take it down. So one of these was, in fact, Halo Online, and they were told to stop production completely. So Microsoft canned the Russia-only free-to-play Halo Online back in 2016. And yeah, Microsoft, of course, they released a statement about it. But in the meantime, everyone, music means that we're just about done here. We'll talk more about this if you'd like. And if you're listening to the Computer America Show, thank you so much, and thank you for joining us. And again, thank you to our guest, Steve from CyberEdge Group. That was a lot of fun, and hey, love talking about cybersecurity. So with that being said, tune in tomorrow, 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern, of course, Monday through Friday, where we are going to be talking to, let's see, let's get it straight from the horse's mouth. Tomorrow, we will be talking to Pop Czar, Mr. Nathan Evans. And Pop Czar is a great website for all things, pop culture, movies, video games, tech, news, things like that. He's always a lot of fun, and be sure to tune in tomorrow. So until next time, be sure to catch us, and hey, thank you for joining us. Hey, if you want to find out anything else, head on over to computeramerica.com and give us a follow anywhere on social media, and be sure to enter our contest. So until next time, have a great day. Thank you so much. Bye-bye, everyone.